Okay. Welcome, everybody, to today's DX Cafe event, Hybrid Headless and the Future of the CMS. I am Matthew McQueenie from Conobos. If you have any thoughts or questions as we move along, please type them in the chat wherever you may be watching this, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn, and we will surface them throughout. We have the ability to put the questions right up on the screen where we will have our esteemed guest. I wanted to say a joke here because we didn't talk about our names, but are you Stefan, like Stephen Curry, or Stefan, like Stefan Urkel from Family Matters? Welcome, if you would give us that, and then you're the Chief Revenue Officer at dotCMS.
Yeah, I listen to both, but I usually say Stefan myself.
Perfect. Well, welcome, Stefan.
Thanks, Matt.
Could we start by telling a little bit about your background? It doesn't have to be a little bit. I just said that, but tell us about your background and what led you here today, where we sit with you as the Chief Revenue Officer of dotCMS.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career in IT back in the day. They just started to call it IT. It was in 1995. That was at the Postal Service in the Netherlands. Spent a couple of years there. Then I moved to another utility, telecommunications. So I worked about 6-7 years for MCI WorldCom, now Verizon Business. And then I moved to consulting for a couple of years with Accenture. Then a short stint at a marketing agency, which was basically my introduction to digital marketing. And from there, I really wanted to work for a software company and enter Hippo. So I was recruited by Hippo to lead their professional services team back end of 2009. But Hippo was still very small, scale up and wearing multiple hats. And I think I was employee 35-ish or so. So we were doing everything. I was doing account management, professional services, also new business. And then after a year, we wanted to focus. And so I started to focus on sales, building out the sales team, channel, and sales engineering. And then we tried different scenarios with the US. They had acquired a small company in the US in 2008. It was run by another Dutch guy. We tried different scenarios. It was based on the West Coast, so the overlap with Amsterdam was very short. Kind of didn't work. We moved the office to Boston, tried to manage it remotely, and then in 2013, I said to the CEO, why don't I go to the US to build out the team and the business there for about a year, and I never came back. So had a very delightful stint with Hippo in the US. Build out the team, build out the business. Then obviously we got acquired in 2016 by Bloomreach. I stayed on for another year, but then after a year, I had the opportunity to join dotCMS as their chief sales officer. Basically repeat what I had done at Hippo. And here we still are, still alive and kicking in the content management industry and still loving it.
So there's two things I want to tease out from that. One, what was it like doing IT for the Postal Service?
It was fantastic. It was awesome because it was really at the crossroads between technology, processes, and commerce. So I was working for the parcel service business unit. So they just had their sorting hubs operationalized. McKinsey just left the door. And so it was really kind of a startup culture. And so it was a lot of freedom, being part of a bigger organization, but it was a, self-sustaining business unit and a lot of freedom. So I thought it was awesome, certainly for your first gig. I thought it was fantastic.
We've had several guests in our podcast and on the webinar who came up in envelopes. And it's hilarious that it kind of is, they're like platforms that can analogize much to what we do to this day digitally, right?
Correct. No, absolutely. No, and I think as also that at the Postal Services, I had my first introduction with what you now would call enterprise content management, but like scanning and imaging and all those technologies. I actually did some cool projects back in 1995 with that kind of technology that was still immature, but back in the day it was pretty cool.
Yeah, back in the days of homegrown
Yep,
CMSs
exactly.
most of the time.
Yep.
On the other one, I wanted to ask about when you came to the U.S. to like live here. That's quite a it's quite a step forward. What do you remember about those early days of coming here, setting up a house, and then obviously
Yeah.
running a business from over here?
Well, I had worked for American companies, with Accenture and MCI, so I was used to the culture, the business culture. But obviously, moving to a country and actually live there is quite different, right? So everything is kind of new a little bit. So that's kind of exciting. It's basically reinventing yourself a little bit, and which I think is exciting because I'm curious. So getting into the groove and the rhythm. But it was very smooth because again, it was just renting a house and go to an office that we already had there. So there was already a small team. So it was, there was a small team, so it has a presence. But it was pretty exciting, So okay, how do we go about this, and recruiting local people, starting to build out the partner network, which worked out pretty well. And I think the first year was tough. But then, we started to scale and started the whole marketing and sales machine started to run. And then we started to close, cool brands that everybody knows in the US, but nobody knows them outside the US, right? So Kohler, for instance, or REI, those are like, marquee brands in the US, but nobody knows them outside the US, certainly not in Europe. But that was really exciting. I think the first year was, getting used to things, but, I get used to changes easily, so it wasn't too hard for me. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was, I think, my best experience. The time at Hippo and certainly those first years. Yeah, it's super exciting. Lots of travel. I've seen every state. We did a lot of travel. On sites, which is nowadays is like you cannot imagine. But doing like 150, 160, trips a year was pretty common. But yeah, not so much anymore, right? It's kind of pivoted, to Zoom and occasionally maybe go on site or go to trade shows. But that's really it. But yeah, I still love it to this very day, and I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to move to the US and build out the business for Hippo and now for dotCMS. It's just super exciting.
Very, very cool. So I wanted to hit on this point here. Many of us are familiar with the CEO. We hear CMO, COO, CTO.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your title. What does a CRO or Chief Revenue Officer do?
Yeah, the focus is on revenue, obviously. I mean, that keeps the lights on, which is new business revenue and existing revenue. My focus really is, it's a little bit misleading, but my focus is really net new logo revenue, right? So we do this direct, so marketing sourced, logos that we hit with the team. And obviously also channel, right? I mean, that's where the scalability is. So that's where, a person like Paul owning the whole, channel and partnerships around the globe. That's where the scalability is, to have partners getting excited about our product and build basically, a practice around our product and implement digital transformation projects. Right.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Paul, it does. And Paul, you talked about, of course, is Paul Abdul, who's global, I think,
Yep.
Lead of partnerships there at dotCMS now, making a lot of hay, making this
Correct.
very webinar happen. In fact, and you've actually brought that
Yep.
up now because I'm interested in how the CRO role might be a little different or similar to others in the tech space. And also, you brought the word partnerships up a few times here. How integral is that word to kind of your operating principles?
No, it's super integral with our operating principles because, like I said, this is where the scalability is, right? So if you don't want to build out a relatively expensive and large sales team, it's way more effective, and certainly from a customer acquisition cost, to build partnerships and have partners bring you the deals, right? That's and again, you want to be an attribution of 50, 60%, where the new logo revenue is brought to you by partners versus the 40% that you source with your marketing efforts, right? That's where you want to be. We're not there. Unfortunately, it takes a little bit of time. It's not something that happens overnight, and partners are like, customers. They come and they go, right? We have partners that have been with us for 15, 16 years, and partners that just signed up a couple of weeks ago, right? So you always have churn, and you have partners that come and go in waves. Sometimes they're very, active and excited about the product, and then that tapers off, and then, they focus on other technologies or what have you, and then they come back and are excited again. So we've seen it pretty much, everything in that regard. But again, from a scalability perspective, working with partners is super important to us. It's really where we focus on, and to build those relationships with agencies around the globe in the key territories for dotCMS, right, which is North America, the Benelux, UK, Ireland, the DAG region, and then Australia, New Zealand. We have a lot of traction in Australia and New Zealand, a lot of customers, but also partners, right? It's one of the quintessential elements of a go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, and I think you'd probably agree. Well, we'll get into what this hybrid headless means and a lot of those elements, but anyone watching really understands that we're in this time of composability, headless, where you choose best of breed solutions across the gamut. And I would imagine that partners come in particularly important because it feels as though to the customer there's a lot more choices now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
No, absolutely. No. I mean, partners typically have, multiple, technologies in their portfolio, right? And multiple CMS solutions, multiple commerce solutions, and what have you. So I never expect exclusivity with our partners, because sometimes we're not a fit and sometimes we're a good fit, right? So in the end of the day, a partner will choose or recommend a solution that makes sense for the customer, right? Which I think is a good thing, because this is a long-term play, very sticky, even with, all the latest developments where you can easily compose your platform and take out, certain elements of your platform. It's easier than, let's say, 10 years ago, but still, if you don't have to take it out, people tend to stick with, certain solutions, right? It's not uncommon in the CMS space to stick to your CMS anywhere between 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will probably tie into this a little, but there's a kind of system for all kinds of digital maturities of customers too, right? Like some aren't maybe ready to be fully composable based on whether it's their procurement, whether it's the staff they have, that oftentimes there is still a place for, and we're burying the lead, right? We'll get to hybrid headless, but there is a place for this more unified solution, right? It can take complexities down, especially if you're not using the full effect of what composable can promise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in composability, right? I mean, I see really some exciting technologies, entering the market and been on the market in the last couple of years. Solution like Uniform, I've always respected, that solution. That's kind of, I think will definitely gain more traction in the market space. And that means that players like dotCMS and the likes, need to follow, right? So there's definitely a lot to be done. Never a dull moment in content management. So I'm excited for the future, future for dotCMS, but also the industry at large. And I think there's some cool challenges that we have. And but even cooler technology to meet those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So, according to your resume there on LinkedIn, you have been with dotCMS for 6 years now.
Yeah.
How has your role evolved within the organization since you've been there?
Yeah, so initially I started to focus on really net new logo sales. That was my focus area to really scale the company with new logos. Other people were involved in the existing customers. Then for a bit, I've taken on existing customers as well. That's where my role changed to Chief Revenue Officer, which I still have, but my real focus right now is just new logo revenue, right? So we really are scaling our sales and marketing engine to bring on those new logos as quickly as possible with the least amount of effort. So my like I said, a little bit in a wave. Started with new logo, expanded to revenue at large, and now back to new logo, and which I like. I mean. It's a different than dynamic, right? Existing customers versus new business, and yeah, that's really my forte also. But as we grow as a company, it makes sense to bring more focus in the organization and have other people, focus on existing accounts, which I fully endorse. So it frees me up to really focus on my territory, which is again new logos, whether it's direct with marketing sourced, leads versus what our partners bring to the table.
Yeah, no, and it's been from your perch. I'm interested in this question. The last year or so, I mean, you could read in the Wall Street Journal, everything has been a bit of a hit to the technology industry, whether there's recession, whether there's recessionary anxieties that almost cause recession. What have you observed about this last year in particular?
Yeah, good question. So two things I would say. Yeah, I've seen a slowdown. We've seen that too. We've seen that cycles take longer because decisions have been extended. So longer decision cycles. We've seen that, deals taking longer than what you expected, slippage to the next quarter. So we've seen that. We've also seen project being canceled. We saw that also already in COVID, right? Where people basically said, yeah, let's put them on hold. But yeah, we had customers where we were talking to them when COVID hit and we closed them last year. So we've seen that too. They were really, it was really on hold, no BS. It was just really on hold. And now was the time to start this project. But we also see, and then that's the other thing that I wanted to say is that the industry that we're in, the driver to re-platform doesn't go away, right? If you're on, for instance, if you're on an old version of vendor X and they stop the maintenance at a certain time, you got to re-platform, whether you like it or not, whether you have the budget or not, you got to do something. And certainly if your business depends on digital, which for every company usually is, and certainly in the mid-market and enterprise space, there's a huge dependency on digital. So you can't really afford to do nothing, right? So those are the two things that I've seen last year as well, where it's like, yeah, it's just business as usual. We have to do this because we're on this track. There's no way for us to wait any longer. We need to do this for these reasons. But we're also seeing deals that I expected to close already in Q1, and we're still talking, right? So a little bit of everything, I would say. But overall, yeah, we've seen these waves, in the market, in any industry, and in the last 15 years for sure. So in that regard, it's no exception in my opinion. I was glad that the debt ceiling was raised. That was also a pivotal moment where I felt like, yeah, if that's not going to happen, we're going to jump into a global recession. And so, yeah, that was a good thing actually. So,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And we just hit on some macroeconomic. We hit on pandemic. How how has it been in these 6 years and even in your roles before? What has it been like evolving as well with the changing CMS and DXP market? Because it's like, it's a bit of a moving target while it's happening, because innovations are happening in product. Forrester, Gartner are starting new categories. Like,
Yeah.
how do you maintain, your vision through all that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's what I love and what I hate about this industry. What I love about this industry is that we always want to reinvent ourselves, right? And so we recategorize ourselves. First it's the CMS, and it's the DXP, and now it's orchestration, whatever. I love that. That's fantastic. But in the end of the day, and I will tell you, I've seen quite some RFPs and prospects obviously reaching out to us and looking for a solution. But my take is that 80% of the requirements that I see, that I've seen in the last 15 years, have not changed. And so it's like 10 years ago, we saw people, personalization. I still talk to prospects who are not in the market for personalization. They're not ready for it. Yeah. They have their standard requirements. Yeah, developer dependency, want to reduce that. We want to have more, streamline the content operations. Those kind of requirements. I saw those requirements already in 29 or 2009, and I still see those. So, yeah, in that regard, it's not very sexy, right? On the other hand, obviously, we see a lot of stuff around AI, and AI is definitely going to make, or has made, its entrance into the industry at large, and certainly content management. Obviously, dotCMS is focusing on that as well, and we're about to release some exciting capabilities in our core product, because again, anything with process and scalability is asking for AI, right? So in that regard, our vision hasn't really changed that much. For us, it's really about content management, right? So at the end of the day, whether you call it a DXP or a headless CMS, at the end of the day, we're here to support complex content management requirements, right? That's first and foremost. Now, obviously, there's more to it, right? So when you talk about hybrid headless or hybrids, to me, it's irrelevant. Again, I've never see a prospect asking for, yeah, we really need a headless CMS, or we really need a hybrid headless CMS. Well, of course you see it, they talk about it. But then I ask the question, why? Why do you need a headless content management system? I will tell you, 80% will say, well, I don't know. Seems like a good idea. I say, well, it is a good idea for the right reasons, the proper reasons, but they may not apply to you. And I said, yeah, but our development team wants to build our flagship in a cool framework, and we want to be able to control that. That's great. That's fantastic. That would certainly qualify most likely for a headless content management system, which is nothing but a repository and APIs that you can pull the content out of, and a nice UI so the non-technical users can manage that content. But let me ask you, you guys are a marketing team, right? And so do you do a lot of campaigns, email campaigns? Yeah. And do you create a lot of landing pages? Yeah, exactly. Well, at least 20, 30 per week. Fantastic. Who's going to build those pages? Well, if you have the developer resources and the priority in-house, then it could work, right? With a pure headless CMS. But I think, here listening to you, that a hybrid headless might be more appropriate, meaning that you use a page builder that's proprietary to the CMS vendor that allows you to create those spiffy landing pages in a couple of clicks without having to engage a developer. How cool is that? That's exactly what we need. Okay, so we're just fulfilling a content management need here. That's all we're doing, right? And I'm pretty bullish about hybrid headless myself. Again, certainly don't want to throw the headless players under the bus. I think they were instrumental in the last couple of years to disrupt the industry, to really refocus and say, hey, there are scenarios where your traditional content management system is not going to work. We need something else, right? So that was great. It shifted basically the whole industry, Sitecore and his mother, everybody to focus on API, at least offer APIs, whether it's an afterthought or not. At least you had the option to pull content out of that closed system via an API. Well, I think that's a huge win, right? But what I see with the headless players is that they also want to build page builders, right? And why is for that particular use case that I just shared with you, right? That's one thing, and the other thing is it makes CMS vendors more stickier, right? So
that's right.
If people start to use your page builder, then the perceived vendor lock is back again. But so that's my thought on again, hybrid headless. I think it's the most sustainable way, right? Having the flexibility to sometimes use your CMS as a headless CMS and sometimes use a page builder for certain scenarios, I think will survive. And it's not one or the other. But again, it also depends on your requirements, right?
Yeah, and I think the other piece you hear, we were talking about this internally, is the idea of omnichannel as a reason, right? And that's another one of those things when you start teasing out, what do you mean by omnichannel? It often doesn't rise up to much more than web and mobile. And and if it does, is it large enough to change the entire operations to satisfy it?
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, everybody wants to execute on an omni-channel strategy, but to your point, 90% it's just web and mobile, and then maybe an intranet, but that's it, right? I mean, obviously in retail you see more advanced things like point of sale and what have you. We have a couple of customers with IoT devices, but that's a minority. In the end of the day, we still love applications and websites,
That's exactly right.
And it's not going to go away.
So here's our big moment here. So we've been talking this hybrid headless thing. In your words, could you tell us how you approach these terms? Headless, composable, and then hybrid headless.
Sure. No, headless for me is like, as a developer team, I want to control the presentation. I want to render the content. I want to have full control and leverage the technology that I like, right? So obviously moving away from the more traditional, harder to source languages like Java, .NET, and what have you, pivoting to more JavaScript frameworks that everybody has been embracing, and where you can get developers across the globe, so no issues there, and just leverage the content management system for the storage and the creation of content, but then again control that whole experience yourself by building that application in one of those frameworks. To me, that's quintessentially headless content management, right? And obviously you also have headless commerce and what have you, but in a CMS context, that's what headless CMS for me stands for. Make sense? Composable. I feel composable is at least that's how I explain it to myself, is a little bit the modern version of best of breed, right? Remember back in the day in 2010, 2011, when we were talking best of breed versus suite play, right? The composable paradigm sounds a little bit like best of breed, where you as an organization can really compose your platform with not only the tools that you prefer, because that's more like the best in breed, but also services, right? So obviously powered by microservices, you can go a little bit more granular than what the best of breed paradigm had to offer, right? Because, okay, I'm using a marketing automation tool, and I'm using a CMS tool, and I'm using a commerce engine. But with composable, it becomes more blurry, more flexible. You can get way more granular in that regard, which I think offers a lot of flexibility, right? So that's how I interpret composable for myself. Now, hybrid headless, we talked a little bit about it, right? So a hybrid headless CMS to me is basically a CMS that can cater for both the headless CMS scenario, right, where you only serve out content over an API, and then the content is being rendered by an external application, whether it's one of those frameworks or what have you. But at the same time, you can also build pages and websites with the proprietary page builder of that CMS from the same instance. So you can do both at the same time. Again, goes back to the example that I shared, where you have your flagship application might be headlessly, fueled, but landing pages are built with the page builder of your CMS, right? To me, that's the quintessential hybrid headless scenario. And it gives you maximum flexibility, right? So we have a lot of customers that come to us for one specific scenario or use case, right? So whether it's traditional content management or headless content management, and then soon after they see the flexibility that we offer, they start to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm no longer cornered in one specific use case. I can, think about this more holistically and have more flexibility in that regard. And that's exactly what hybrid headless to me is. It gives you maximum flexibility, whether it's now from the beginning of your implementation or somewhere in the future, right, in your tenure with a CMS vendor.
On that hybrid headless term, another vendor I hear use that is Kentico, for instance. Is the hybrid term an analyst type thing, or is it something that's kind of burgeoning from the from you vendors yourself?
I don't know. Well, you know how this goes, right? In the industry, someone coins a term. It's usually Gartner or Forrester, and then everybody starts to parroting it. I really don't know who coined the term hybrid headless. I see some of my colleagues using it, and some other people use different terms. But yeah, usually an analyst starts to coin it and articulate, a certain category of solutions, and then the market follows. So we certainly didn't come up with hybrid headless for sure. So,
and are there, from what you understand, are there like different flavors to hybrid headless based on the organization, or is it a pretty standard understanding?
I think it's a pretty common understanding. Again, going back to that example that I gave, is you either, you can use either the APIs and just pull the content out of the CMS and render it yourself, or you use the page builder. So it's more tied to the presentation of the content, right? And I think most people understand what hybrid headless means, that you indeed have that flexibility on who renders the content, who owns the glass, another term that we use a lot in this industry. But I think it's a pretty standardized, acronym or definition.
Last one on this slide. When we go back to composable, for instance, do you think that composable especially came out because, like, when we had the suite-based all-in-ones, all of a sudden Google Analytics emerged as a better analytics tool. All of a sudden people start using Constant Contact or MailChimp as an email, and then it starts to kind of untether, like a sweater that's being pulled apart, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, we could learn this the way this monolithic system is doing it, or we know how to use this one. Do you think that was like a paradigm where it started to shift the balance?
I think so. I think the whole notion of composability goes back to customers, right? Where customers are struggling to do what they want to do with the technology, right? So usually it's supporting the business, right? And they've been, overwhelmed by vendors like us with all the different technologies, and created a clutter of all those technologies, and then you have to manage all those solutions. And yeah, but if we want to do X, Y, and Z, we need to upgrade this, and that's another $200,000 ticket, and what have you. So I think that's where composability really starts to shine, where you can leave the complexity and the limitations where they are, but you can bring in this extra layer of flexibility and usability that will help customers and marketing teams to do their thing, right? So what I really like, and again, I'm not working for a uniform, but again, if I want to go give kudos to a vendor in the space, it's really uniform. I like what they're doing. I think they define a new category. I think there is a legitimate play, and I certainly think where customers are sitting on an older version of a specific CMS or have multiple CMSs, where you don't want to deal with the intricacies of those underlying CMSs, but basically offer that composable or composability layer that makes it easier for the end user to do what they need to do, is create digital experiences regardless where the content and the data is coming from, right? So I think there's a huge potential for those platforms like Uniform to make it even easier, right? To not be involved in replatforming every 5 to 10 years. Well, on the other hand, vendors will stop supporting, certain technologies, right? So at some point you have to, either upgrade or replatform. But then again, I can see Uniform also build proprietary, capabilities. So even if you're still on, let's say, an older version of, let's say, Sitecore, you can slowly migrate content to Uniform or the composability layer, and start creating new content from the get-go there, right? So I think you'll see a different kind of platform that makes it more elegant than what the more traditional replatforming projects are, right? I mean, talk to Hertz; they can tell you everything about replatforming a content management system.
Oh, the famous $40 million website.
That famous one, yeah, that famous one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. You had something there?
Yeah, nobody gets fired for, selecting that particular vendor, right? But
yeah, no, it's something else. So now that we've talked, we'll spend our last couple minutes. Now that we've spoken about the whole industry, let's give a little bit of love to dotCMS itself explicitly. So could you tell us a little bit about the origins? I believe it started as a marketing company, right?
that's correct. Yeah, and then really as a marketing services company, basically building websites, digital agency building websites for enterprises, right? And at some point, we even had an email delivery platform, which we retired, which I thought was, well, maybe we should revitalize the codes and build our own marketing automation platform. But originally an agency, and then in 2006, we launched our first version of dotCMS 1.0, and that's what we've been focusing on ever since. Since 2009, we've been offering dotCMS Cloud, which is our platform as a service offering based on AWS and also Google Cloud recently. And we still offer our self-hosted product, dotCMS Enterprise. And we also have a third version. We call it dotCMS Cloud Anywhere, which is basically the customer has the cloud. It's basically the customer cloud, but we deploy and manage dotCMS. Right? So basically 3 flavors of products that we offer. But the majority is dotCMS Cloud. It's more effective. It's an elegant product, and it's very popular. I would say 100% of our new logos in the last couple of years have been choosing for dotCMS Cloud.
Very nice. What? Maybe we talk about these two here. We always love ICP, right? Who is the ideal customer for dotCMS?
Yeah, we have three. Basically three industries that we focus on. Financial services is very well represented in our customer base, followed by high tech and utilities. Also a very traditional Java environment, although it matters less and less, in my opinion. And then thirdly, retail, right? We have customers in pretty much every industry with about 160 customers around the globe, 70% in North America, 20-ish% in Europe, and then 10% in Asia Pacific. So we do have customers all the way in New Zealand and in China and what have you. So we do offer 24/7 critical care support. But those are the three ICPs that we focus on.
And how do you? So I guess there's roadmap decisions by focusing on those, right? Is it like security for finance things? Like, what are some of those considerations?
No, that's a great question. It actually goes back to our positioning, right? So we really focus on complex content management requirements first and foremost. So we love complexity and then offer a solution that can make it easy to work with those complex requirements. But security, definitely security first platform, certainly in financial services, to your point, where not only certification like ISO and SOC 2 and all that good stuff, but also within the product, like, integrations with authentication tooling, obviously encrypting of content and all that good stuff. That's super important. We also focus on scalability and performance, right? So that's what we see a lot in those ICPs as well. dotCMS is a very scalable and performant platform, right? We have customers that have very strict requirements around response times for an API call. It's usually around 3 to 4 milliseconds. We have customers that really expect that because they are 100% online business. And also scalability, right? They want to scale up and they want to scale down. Sometimes they need, 4 clusters, 4 nodes each, and sometimes it's a little bit less, right? So being able to offer that flexibility and scalability and that performance is important to our customers, right? So we have customers that have 5-6 million visitors per day, like a Dairy Queen, right? So you can imagine the amount of requests, to dotCMS, although there's a lot of caching and what have you. But yeah, they don't need half a data center to make that performance, right?
Yeah.
Or, I work for a large for-profit hospital organization who manage 1,500 websites on a single platform, 200 to 300 users concurrently in the system throughout the day. Yeah, same story. It's a very efficient platform, I would say.
That's great. I happen to come across like a search engine site article yesterday where it was talking about the most used CMSs, when you do the checks. And of course it's WordPress, right? But
of course,
it makes you think, because it was some crazy number, like 70 or 80% or something. And then you think about the fact that what's left over for this enterprise and how competitive and relatively small that group of exalted enterprise customers are. I mean, we always say Fortune 500, that's 500 companies. How do you find customers come to you, whether it's outbound, inbound, and how aware do they seem? I'm not trying to call out customers, but of all these different players, of the moving headless thing, of the hybrid headless, of the on-premise, there's still a fair amount vying for that customer base. How do you stand out?
No, that's a great question, right? I mean, again, we continue to focus on where we're good at, right? I mean, we've been in business since 2006, so we cover a lot of grounds in terms of requirements, and we continue to do so. a product is never done, right? So there's always, an edge case and what have you. And right now, for instance, we're, going deeper in certain areas of our product, like for instance, around SEO or multilingual or multi-tenancy, right? So you're never done with your product, right? And so what we continue to do is really listen to our customers and our partners and make sure that what they want to do with the product is aligned with our roadmap, right? Because again, we want to stay aligned with what they want to achieve in their business and what they need, right? Because again, we're just a tool. And so we want to support our customers and be successful. So going deep and going not so much wide, I think we're going deeper is super important for us to maintain that a rich feature set, and continue to support those complex and sophisticated content management use cases, right? So that's super important to us. In terms of how do we, connect to prospects, right? I mean, this is still an inbound motion most of the time, besides channel, which is also inbound. But from a go-to-market perspective, we obviously invest in inbound, but also account-based marketing, right? Again, we're not fishing in that pond where the Adobes are fishing, because that's a relatively small pond. We do have Fortune 20 customers, but I'd rather focus on the mid-market. It's much bigger. There's millions of companies in the US alone that would fit in our ideal customer profile and that can afford our average, subscription, right? So that's what we're focusing on. And I think, we can still triple our revenue in the next 2 to 3 years by just focusing on that ICP in that segment of the market with the product that we offer today and what we will deliver tomorrow, right? I mean, with any product, you have early adapters, people that really want to work with the latest and the greatest. We have those customers too, and they really drive the possibilities of your product and can really help us to get excited about new technologies and innovation. But like I said at the beginning of our conversation, in the last 15 years, 90% of the requirements that I see haven't changed. People still really appreciate a good preview, or drag and drop, or a proper workflow engine where you can really, build out complex multi-step parallel workflows. And that's something we've been doing for 15 years, but it still resonates, right? Because again, those requirements don't go away, and certainly not in, highly regulated, industries where, content governance is super important. You'll always have, the need for tooling like that. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about the fact that when you're in the process of choosing new technology, implementing new technology, the technology is like the God on the mountain. But in reality, once that phase is over, it needs to be like the entity that lets itself out the back door and just kind of lets the people enabled to do their business. So it's kind of a funny balance mentally to work between those.
It absolutely is. Yeah, no, for sure.
All right. Lastly, how do you, Stefan, stay abreast of everything? Yeah. What do you read? Who do you follow?
Yeah, I follow pretty much our key competitors. I'm always excited about what the competition is doing, obviously. CMS Wire, DXP 360. I follow a couple consulting companies, the big fives. They usually have pretty good content about digital transformation, that interests me, obviously. And every now and then there's some good books that I like, certainly around sales and marketing. We started to work with an agency recently that really have a very unique look on go-to-market strategy. So I got super excited about this and really been reading into it. So I think it's like the next, predictable revenue that we had in sales, like back in 2010, 2011. That was kind of, the epiphany back then. and this is the next new thing. So we're currently implementing, and so I'm get pretty excited about it, and hope to see the benefits shortly.
Well, that is great. I usually have this slide, but oftentimes we hit many of the of the questions and tangents. So I want to say thanks so much for coming on. And if there is if there's any final words before we can say you're hours ahead in Europe and you're ready to go to a barbecue. If there's any final words to leave the audience with before we head on out.
No, thanks for having me, Matt. No, again, I've been in this space now for almost 15 years. I'm still as excited about content management as I was when I moved into this industry. I think there's a great future for everybody working in this industry. Certainly the technology that's entering the market and the cool stuff you can do, not only as a vendor or, but also as a marketing team and a technology team. So yeah, a lot of stuff happening right now, and couldn't be more excited about being in this industry.
Great. Well, we couldn't be more excited about having you. We really appreciate your presence here, and we wish everybody a nice end to summer.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.